Welcome, everyone. It's Tequity Tuesday, and I'm Amy DeLouise, your host, founder of GALSNGEAR, and also a producer and person who definitely needs self-care. So I'm really looking forward to the tips I'm going to learn from our fabulous panelists today. Before we start, though, I want to shout out our sponsors and partners, and especially welcome some new sponsors, AJA, Signient, and Chiron. And also shout out to our returning sponsors, Dell, NVIDIA, and Blackmagic Design. And we also have another new sponsor who's helping us with a networking event that we're producing out at NAB Show, and that's Flanders Scientific. So thank you very much, all of our fabulous sponsors, for coming on board with us and caring about women in Tequity and trying to make the industry a better place for everyone. I don't know about you, but we just had Valentine's Day over here in the States. And, you know, that's kind of just a whole racket unto itself. But one of the things that made me think of putting this program in February was, you know, we send Valentines to other people, but not necessarily to ourselves. And it seems like we really need them sometimes, especially in our 24/7 industry. So let me introduce our speakers who are going to give us some insights on how they handle that kind of pressure. First, I have Jin Soon Brancalhao. She's a senior technical marketing manager at GNL, which is a German systems integrator, specializing in broadcasting and media solutions. She's been recognized in the list of top women in technology by Parks Associates, and she has more than a decade of experience in community development, demand generation, event marketing, and partnerships, and she's been in roles across the United States, the UK, and Europe. She was born in Brazil into a multicultural home and emigrated to the US when she was young. And so we're very excited to have her here, also because she travels, plays a lot of guitar. She has a lot of different interests that I'm sure she'll fill you in on. So welcome, Jin Soon.
Thank you. Thank you. I always love Amy's intros. They make you feel so good.
Now, not to be outdone, Carla Prates is also one of our panelists today. She's a marketing maven at Digital Anarchy, also one of our longtime sponsors, who will also be helping us host the party. And she brings innovative technology to video editors, broadcast designers, visual effects artists, and pretty much anyone who wants to make their film or video or television look better than it did when it started. So she does a great job with that. And she is also Brazilian. So what are the odds of that? That was not my intention when I booked this group, but hey, we're going to have a great time with them. And she has a background in journalism and also social media, and a degree from film and video production at City College of San Francisco. She's working on her first documentary feature, actually, so that's very cool. And what I think is very interesting is she is also an assistive technology trainer, teaching people with visual impairments on how to use phones and computers and other fun stuff. So I think, and that's a big theme in her movie. So I think it's really interesting that she's trying to make our world bigger, which is another piece of what we're trying to do with Tequity. So I think that's fantastic. And I know Carla is going to talk about her special interest in yoga and other activities to balance out her life. So welcome, Carla.
Thank you. It's good to be back.
So I'm going to start out by saying, as I mentioned, you know, we're in a 24/7 profession. We're often exhausted. What can we do for self-care? Because that is another part of career, not just development, but longevity. If you burn out all the time, you're not going to stick around for as long as Karen and I and some others on here have been able to do. So I'm wondering if we could start with you, Carla, and just say, like, what do you do that can help you rejuvenate and keep yourself from burning out, especially because both of you travel a lot for business. So let's start with travel. Like, Carla, what do you do when you're traveling globally? How do you manage that?
Yeah, as Amy mentioned, I wear many hats at DA and other jobs. And specifically for traveling, I think for me it's important to always have like small reminders. We are always like running around. So I carry my little mala, my meditation necklace with me everywhere I go, because even when I don't have time to take 5 minutes to close my eyes, if I go to the bathroom and I wash my hands, I see it. It kind of reminds me to, check my breath, see how I'm doing. And I put a boundary for myself. A couple of years ago, I don't work on airplanes unless there is a crisis. I figured that I can't be productive. I tried many different things to be able to be productive at airplanes. But I just realized it's not for me. I bought a different computer because I thought my computer was too big. I tried, doing just writing. It just doesn't work for me. So what I do is, the couple of days before my trips, I plan really well, and I rather work late hours before the trip than actually work on the airplane.
I
So what
love
I
that
do, I
idea.
usually download podcasts. They are unrelated to work.
Yeah,
Or have my book with me, or bring my crochet project to the airplane, and I just really try to do not work from there
yeah.
unless it's really needed. If it's a really long flight, I check emails, but just the bad internet connection and all the limitations made me super frustrated and didn't make me produce anything
Right.
substantial.
And then you get there and you're even more tired and sort of
Yeah.
stressed. I think
Yeah.
that's a great idea. And I often bring a book and not look at screens. I know people, my kids are like, aren't you going to download 500 movies? And I'm like, no, actually, I'm not. I'm going to read a physical book.
Yeah.
What about you, Jin Soon?
Well, these days I don't travel nearly as much as I used to when I was managing global events. That was very rough. But all the little things I would do mostly had to do with, similar to Carla, reminding you of your routines back home. For example, if I have a certain nighttime routine, I actually had got this advice from a sales guy who traveled so much, and he was saying how he would bring, for example, his scents. If you had like a lavender spray, for example, that you like, and that's something I like, so I bring that spray with me, or anything that helps me feel like music that makes me feel like I'm at home, music I'm listening to, so that you can have a good night's sleep in the hotel. Because I don't know about you guys, but I sleep really badly in hotels, and that really helps me feel like a little bit at home. But the other main thing has to do with exercise, really. So in terms of getting there, if you can get there a day before and still manage to get some kind of body movement that evening or in the morning before you have to start, that's great. And especially when you come back to, especially from different time zones, if you can get yourself to go to the gym that evening, even if you're tired, but just do something small. And that evening or the next morning, it really helps you get back into the rhythm.
That's a great idea. And I know, Carla, you do a lot of yoga, right?
I do. Yeah, I try to do it even if it's, a 15 minutes. Sometimes at NAB, it's impossible to actually do a yoga class. But one thing I learned with self-care is that it doesn't need to be long or complicated. I think we keep postponing that because we think we need to meditate and completely empty our minds for, I don't know, half an hour. And if you really can sit for 5 minutes, and even if your mind doesn't stop, it helps you get your breath back. So I try to do sometimes even chair yoga when I'm waiting for, an email reply that doesn't come and it's kind of stopping me from doing other things. Or when
Right.
my engineers are in their caves and I'm like, please come out while I'll wait for them to send me what I need. I really try to, maybe I can pause here and just do a 5-minute breath exercise or yoga stretch on the chair.
That's a really great idea. And we're actually going to be building more of those kind of things into our Gals and Gear programming. So look for those
Yeah.
coming up. One of the things I wanted to talk about today was content coming at us. I find this to be one of the hardest parts of being a technologist and being in a technology-driven industry. I am reading so much material and there's so much information coming at me all the time. So how do you manage that onslaught of information and still stay up to date, but also be able to be productive and do what you need to be doing for your job? Jin Soon, can you start?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I'm a firm believer of working smarter and not harder these days. And so I try all the shortcuts. I mean, newsletters, of course, there's all that information you can subscribe to. But I also like to just follow people on LinkedIn who do all the work for me. They read up on everything and they post all their summaries and their viewpoints and whatnot. And the other thing is that I really like, so for me as a marketer to understand what the customers or broadcasters are looking for is talking to the salespeople, the front line, the people who are talking to the customers, because they're hearing the complaints, they're hearing what they need, and just going direct to the source. For me, that's helpful. Yeah.
What about you, Carla?
Yeah, I do all of that, but also what it sounds silly, but it's actually very effective. I try to join groups, user groups, and like on social media, sometimes Twitter has all these post-production groups. And they bring up not only the things they like, but the things that they don't like. They usually complain or ask for assistance with troubleshooting something. And sometimes we can catch, I do a lot of product, I've been doing more and more product management for DA. And it's a great way to find out what the software is lacking, or what's not working with Premiere Pro, so we can catch possible tech support issues early on. So I join a lot of user groups and try to read through the threads. And from there, it's kind of a filter where I take notes and then I do some more in-depth research about the topics that I think are going to impact our work the most.
Well, it's interesting you would say that, because we actually started a beta testing group at GALSNGEAR. So if you ever have any particular software issues you want tested, we have a really good kind of curated group of women who can test those. And we're doing that right now for some new secret features for Adobe and some new things for Chiron, actually. So we're excited about that, because just a little sidebar, unfortunately, women are not often invited to beta test. And so we're trying to change that.
Nice.
So that's another thing, is that companies can be more efficient in what they're doing as they transform their products. So one thing I wanted to ask about is just talking about a company. If you're working within a company, and even if you're a freelancer, but you have clients who are companies, the company has its own goals and needs, which may or may not align with your personal goals and needs, or sometimes those might change and suddenly there's a misalignment. And I'm wondering, how do you make sure that your needs are being met, or figure out a time when they're not, and now you need to do something different? So I'm going to ask Jin Soon first. And you can talk in generalities if you need to.
Well, yeah, for me, the number one thing here is first make sure you're in the right company for you. I mean, if it's not the right company, it's not aligning with your values and how you want to live your life and do your personal goals, it's not going to work. You could try, but it'll be tough. So when that's settled, when you can get to a place where you are in a place where you're valued, and I've had this experience recently. I don't know if you want me to actually tell this quick story about it.
I do.
Okay, very, very short
Whatever
story.
you're willing to share is fine.
Yeah, no problem. So I had like my last experience in my job was I had a little bit of a dramatic exit, because I had been feeling the company went through a lot of changes, and I had been feeling a little bit undervalued in my new role, underutilized, and I really like to make sure I'm growing in whatever role I'm in, and I wasn't feeling that. So there was a couple instances where I was feeling like I think I need to leave. I think I need to leave, and I didn't, and I didn't. And then finally, I got to this one point where we were all at a marketing kickoff in New York City, and I was sitting there, and just everything in my body was being like saying, get out, like leave, this is not for you, like this is not going to work. And I listened to my body, and while I was sitting there, I booked myself a flight that afternoon out back home, and I sent my resignation. And it was the best decision I've ever done, and it was not like it's not something I recommend to be rude and just get up and leave, but it was, I messaged everyone understood my reasons then, and it was everyone knew that I was in this place that I wanted to leave. So it was, the decision was respected, but what I was really happy about is that I listened to myself.
Right.
And the other, yeah.
And the other thing,
the other thing I wanted to mention, that so once I did get myself into a company that I absolutely love and I feel aligns very much with values, and it's brought me so much space to be able to work on my goals, but you still have to be intentional about it. And so when the way I think about it is you have to serve yourself first before you start serving your company's goals. So what I do, last year I was writing a book. So I made sure I woke up an hour earlier before I had to, and use that hour with my coffee and, nice morning sunlight and breeze, and just wrote for an hour. And once I was done, then I switched, I went to the office, and then I started my work day. So making sure you serve yourself first, because no matter what happens in the rest of the day, you're going to feel good, because at the end you feel like I did something for me.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a little bit like on the plane, put your oxygen mask on first before assisting others.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. And I know there's a couple people in this audience, and I'm not going to call them out, of course, who have talked to me about very similar situations where they just realized it was not a good fit. And, sometimes that's because you're just in a different place and maybe that's just not the right timing. And sometimes it's really because that's just not the right person to be working for, or the right company to be working for. And so you have to recognize that within yourself. I certainly had that happen to me very early in my career in a very abusive situation with my boss. And it took a while to stop sort of questioning myself and my own body that was definitely reacting extremely harshly to that situation and saying, get out, get out, get out. But I wasn't listening to those cues because I thought there was something I needed to fix. And so I think that's something that we have to pay attention to. So I think that's a great piece of advice. Carla, how about you? Do you have some advice on sort of the right fit for a company? And even as the company evolves, how do you make sure that there's the space for you to evolve?
Yeah, I think the first thing is knowing what you want. I think it's hard to set boundaries and, advocate for space for yourself and, without really dropping in and understanding what you need in a day-to-day. So I try to check in very often. And also I work at a company and I chose to work at a company that has an open dialogue. We can be very honest. I can come to Jim and say, I am burned out and tell him what I need from the company and for myself. So that's really important to me. I have family abroad. I take care of my grandparents together with my mom. So very early on, when my grandmother started having health issues for me, I couldn't focus at work because I was like, what about if she goes to the hospital? I'm in the US. I need to leave everything and move back to Brazil. And to have the space to sit with him and say, hey, I need to be able to go back to Brazil whenever I need. And I'll be committed to gaining the trust that I can work remotely. And I did. And I think that's very important to me to be able to come to my boss and say, this is not working. Yeah, recently I had that because I wear so many hats. My role was getting super blurred. Like we went to the NAM conference and I realized I didn't even know how to introduce myself anymore.
Right.
And that was super triggering for me. It was like, oh my God, I'm not good at anything because I do everything. I don't even feel entitled to say I'm this. And it was distracting me so much that I wasn't being productive. So I finally, asked Jim for a meeting and said, it's not that I'm not going to do all the things, but I need a more well-defined role. But before that, I came up with a plan. I came up with different options and, this is what I think could be. But I want to make sure
Right.
it's right for both of us. And we settled on a specific role that I can actually be comfortable and say to people, I am at the company.
That's great advice. I think definitely for those who are earlier in their careers, coming up with a plan and not just coming up with a problem. I mean, I always say this to my team anyway, just when we're working for clients. I say, if there's a problem, let's present the client with the problem and the solution, or a couple of options for a solution, not just the problem. But I think that's a great, great point that, you have to sometimes figure these things out, especially frankly, in smaller companies where everybody's doing a lot of things, because that's just how small companies are. I know that's the way my company is. I'm the chief bottle washer and person who changes the toner cartridges in the printer as well as all the other stuff. But also in big companies where they're moving really, really fast and breaking things and, new divisions are evolving and innovations are happening. And, a lot of times they're really not checking in with people to figure out what's happening on the ground with those jobs as they evolve and morph into new jobs. I'm curious about if your needs are not being met and you're trying to look for a new employer, do you have some tips? I mean, I know you haven't really left Digital Anarchy, Carla, but maybe Jin Soon, since you did make a transition, you just have maybe a couple of things to look for. Like, how did you find that really great fit where you are now? What were you looking for? Because not every job description really gives you much clue as to the culture of a company.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I would say that one of the biggest things that helped me get this job that I have now is my network on LinkedIn. So really being active on LinkedIn and letting people know you're looking for help and asking for help. Not only that, a few months before I did quit my last job, I was working with a career coach, and she helped me kind of gain clarity. She had the 3 C's: clarity, courage, and compassion. And that really helped me align myself with what I wanted. And I wrote down everything. She would make me practice asking for what I wanted, for the salary I needed, all these things. And the biggest thing that I wanted, which was very bold, is I wanted to move to Austria because my partner is Austrian, he lives here. And I was like, wow, how am I gonna get a company to sponsor me yet another visa to Austria? Because in London, I had 2 visas, which is fine. There's a lot of companies in London. Austria is not as many, you know.
Right.
And but it did. And in the end, like but 2 out of 7 companies said, yeah, we can make that work. And so you just have to, I think you have to ask for what you need. That's the biggest thing. And then in terms of finding out company culture, I try to like stalk other people who live in that who work in that company, and ask them, the ones that are not involved with my interview, to say, hey, what is it really like there? And I do tend to try to ask around. I don't know if that's helpful.
It is. Anything you want to add to that, Carla?
Yeah, I really check in. I basically every year, even, I've been at DA, it's gonna be 6 years now, I can't believe it. But I always had more than one job in my life. I was in survival mode for like, 9 years. I'm just 10. I'm just really just starting to settle because I was like visa, I got divorced, and that was a mess. And my visa was attached, my visa was attached to that marriage, and it was just a mess. But what I do, with every time I left one of the jobs that I really, every year I make a list of the things that are working and the things that are not working. And every time I left a company was because there was something that wasn't working that couldn't be fixed. And those are usually values or, routine procedures that really don't work for me. So I think I really try to check in and do that. And, also think if you're starting a new job, because I'm also always doing a second job, I'm always getting like extra things and helping people, but I try to think that I am also interviewing. I think that changes everything, because usually we are conditioned to go to a job interview or look for companies trying to identify who wants us, and we forget to think that we are also interviewing and trying to figure out who we want to work with.
Right. Right.
So I think that's I try to keep that in mind.
I think you've brought up some really good things. I love doing a personal strategic plan every year. I have, it's not quite the same as the plan for my company. I have a strategic plan that certainly has my work and professional goals as part of it, but there's also personal goals and other kinds of goals in there, and family goals and caregiving goals and self-care goals that are all part of that plan. And I check in with it actually every quarter, which I would highly recommend. And a lot of it is what you're suggesting, which is sort of what worked before, what do I want to keep, and what do I want to get rid of that didn't work. So that's a great thing. Another thing I would suggest is getting an accountability partner. And certainly the Gals and Gear network is a great place to find that person. It doesn't have to be a person who has expertise in coaching. It really just needs to be someone who's willing to listen and to touch base. Usually my accountability partner and I would check in like once a month. And it can be somebody who knows the industry, but maybe is in a different part of the industry. I mean, it can be helpful for them to have something of a clue of some of the words that we speak in this kind of specific industry, but they don't have to be doing exactly what you're doing. I think that helps.
Yeah, and like, this is gonna sound woo-woo. I'm spiritual. I read tarot, I do all the things. But
I'm gonna ask you about that in a minute, so don't worry.
Yeah, my accountability partner is the moon. I work with the moon phases. So it really is. So instead of just doing, a New Year's every December, January, the moon cycle has 28 days. So I check in on the new moon and the full moon. I just do like plant new seeds on the new moon and see what happened throughout the moon cycle, and then, do a little ritual with the full moon to reset it.
I like the planting seeds. That's very cool.
Yeah.
And I think both of you have pointed out sort of always recentering yourself. I mean, I actually have like a giant whiteboard over my desk over here that has, 8 billion things that we're doing for clients and all the stuff we're doing for Gals and Gear. But right in the middle of it are sort of my 3 touch points, which are ask for what you deserve, know the goal, pay yourself first. Those are my 3 mantras. So especially as a self-employed person, the pay yourself first thing is very important. But that also goes for being in a company and making sure you're putting money in your retirement plan, or you're putting money in your travel plan, or whatever those additional funds are. So I think it's really important to have something that you physically write down and check in with, because we're just busy all the time and otherwise we don't do it. I'm wondering if folks have questions. So if you do, just drop them in the chat and I'll be sure to pick them up, because I think these are great people to talk to. And while you're thinking of questions, what are some tips to make time for yourself, and what are your tools? And I know you mentioned both yoga and tarot. So I'll start with you, Carla. What are some things you do to make time for yourself and space for yourself?
Yeah, my yoga is sacred. So it's, I go 5 times a week. I'm planning on taking a yoga teacher training. It's just, so for me, it's yoga, but whatever exercise you actually enjoy doing and you don't do just to lose weight or to get fit. I think we are conditioned to go exercise for that. And I think we can find a balance between something that, makes you feel happy with your body, but also is the place that you forget about the world. That's yoga to me. I go not because I feel obligated to, but when I don't go, my body asks for it. But I have my little altar behind me. I don't know if you guys can see, but that's my physical reminder. So even if it's a little corner, to put things that calm you down, and to put things that, you can stop for like 5 minutes and, pull a card. For me, it doesn't need to be tarot, but I have those oracle decks that sometimes I just can't stop my brain. I'm like, sit there, pull a card and read it. That's all it takes.
Right.
But I think one of the biggest things that I learned from a group of tarot readers was actually not related to tarot, but I keep a little to-go bag close to my altar, and that bag has a journal, a pen. It has a bottle of water that never leaves that bag. It has power bars. It has a blanket, like a little thing that I can throw on the floor, and it has a very cheap, like $10 yoga mat that I can throw anywhere. But basically, when the day is super tough, I don't need to think, or I don't need to prepare the bag. I just grab that bag, and I have a designated space that it's 5 minutes walk from my house. It's a tiny park. It has 2 benches and 3 like little trees. And I just drag it there, put it on the floor and just stay there for a little bit. Sometimes, throw a sandwich and have my lunch there. So that's been super helpful to me to keep it ready and, just go.
That's a great idea. What about you, Jin Soon?
Those are really cool tips. I honestly am going to be to say something very obvious, but just staying really organized. And my main tool for that is my calendar. I put everything in there. Like if I need to have a meal, my lunch break is in there, my gym time is in there, and it's my work calendar. But of course,
Yeah.
if it's something really personal, you don't want your colleagues, you can make it private. But I put everything, because I look at that like 20,000 times a day. So I know that if it's there, I will do it. And if I time myself, I will do it. And that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, I do the same thing. I block out my lunch, and I got very sad when my son told me about his new job where everybody took meetings between 12 and 1 and 1 and 2. And I'm like, when do they eat? And everybody must be really cranky at that company, but he likes it. But I was like, when you get a little farther along, you might need to push back on that, or sometimes block your lunch out, because I just need to reset. Usually I walk my dog and then I have lunch, or vice versa, and it's just a reset time for me. So I put it all in there too. I agree, and block it out so other people can't book it.
Exactly.
We've got a question in the chat. What are some ways you prioritize self-care during high pressure or deadline driven projects? Which is probably everything. Any ideas on that?
Yeah, I think going back to the idea that it doesn't need to be complicated or long is super important, at least for me.
Yeah.
When we are dealing with product releases, for example, I make sure to wake up a little bit earlier, and I need to wear my mala on those situations. It's my little meditation. If you put like jewelry that makes you feel, you know, calm, or I have also like a moon necklace with a a crystal that always reminds me of self-love, is the rose quartz, is and colors. For me, I wake up a little earlier and I make sure to notice how I feel and think about what color is going to make me, you know, it's going to balance my energy. I work a lot of colors. Amy came in with this beautiful sweater, and she was talking about how she wanted to pop up because, you know, it's been tough. And I really work with colors. Behind me, I have the chakras, if you see, and that reminds me to think about the colors I'm gonna wear. So I have my designated colors. If I'm feeling too sensitive or if I have to really focus, black is what kind of shields me and protects me. You know, if I'm having trouble communicating my needs, I wear blue, which is the throat chakra. So I really work with colors, and you know, that's a very simple way to remind yourself of how you felt when you woke up. And I try not to pick up my phone until I realize how I feel. Because as soon as you pick up your phone and you start checking emails or checking Instagram, it messes up how you're feeling. So before I touch my phone, I close my eyes and say, how do you feel today? Tired, energized, you know, wanting to sleep a little more, not. So.
Right. That's a
Yeah.
good point. Jin Soon, anything else on sort of when you're under pressure for deadlines?
I would say like one of the, let's say, hacks is if there's anything you can take that with you on a walk, that especially we're doing media and we have a lot of creative projects, sometimes when you're just sitting there, you don't realize how much time you're wasting just trying to find the right ideas and trying to put things together. And just going on a walk has always helped me, like, just comes, it pops to me. It not only does it help me relax, it helps me think through my ideas, and then suddenly I'm taking notes all along the way, and then I get back to my desk and I start popping it out.
Yeah. Well, and actually, I really like to do walking meetings, and I know younger people on my team are kind of like the telephone, but because we got also acclimated to Zoom and everything. But honestly, it depends. If I have to really take a lot of notes, I can't do that on a walk. But if it's really like a brainstorming team meeting and you need to be creative, I find it's much easier if everybody's walking. You know, ideally outside, but you could be on a treadmill or what have you. One thing I just dropped into the chat for all of you is Erica Ginsberg's new book, Creative Resilience, which is fantastic. She's a colleague here in Washington, D.C., and has written just a terrific book about resilience. And each chapter kind of focuses on a different aspect of creativity. And then it has like little things you can do. And I think some of them are really, really helpful. And I've been using that a lot. So I would definitely recommend that. Plus, it's always great to support a small independent woman-owned press as well. Another question is, can you provide tips for those going through career transitions or periods of uncertainty in between jobs while prioritizing self-care, because these periods are high stress for most? Yes, that is very true. Any ideas for that, for career transitions?
I mean, once I went to Bali, if you can do that, I recommend it.
Just totally unplugging.
Yes, exactly. Totally unplugging. And that's where I started to write this book. I've always said to myself for years that I would write, and that's where I really was able to start writing it. And that made me feel so good, because I not only was I unplugging and relaxing, coming into a peaceful place, I was also working on something for myself that I felt like was an investment into myself. Yeah.
Well, and one thing about writing is when you really get into the zone, they call it flow state. And I'm actually doing a presentation at NAB show about time management for creatives. And I talk about the fact that time really, we think of time as being like equal, which I guess technically it is, but really it isn't. Because when you're in flow state, you know how it can happen where you just dive into something like writing a book, or for me, playing violin. And then all of a sudden, like 2 hours have gone by and you don't know where that time went. That's because time is really more elastic to our brains. And that's a good thing. It's actually good to be in flow state. And I think one of the problems that happens if you're going through a stressful time, whether it's personal or job transition, is that your time is very fractured. And when your time is fractured, because you're doing so many different things, sending out resumes, looking at links for other jobs, you know, whatever, following up with somebody about a meeting, it can make your body literally physically have issues. So it's like we need some fractured time is okay and multitasking time, but we also need flow state time. So whatever you can do to put yourself in flow state, whether it's meditation or yoga or weightlifting, I do a lot of that too, where I find that really centering because I have to pay attention to my form, so I can't just dial it in. I have to be very concentrating. So something where you can concentrate is really helpful, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I wanted to add.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Sorry, really quick. I wanted to add because I know that when you're in between in the in-between phase, you have a lot of self-doubt. And one of the most important things I think I did for myself in those times was writing down evidence about why I know I'm a valuable employee, why all the things I have accomplished and I have done for other companies, where, you know, I've taken them from A to B, write it down and create like a set of evidence that you always can look at and be like, well, I did that, I can do that. And because there's so much self-doubt that comes in that time. So yeah, it's important especially for us women without our,
I was gonna say exactly that. There is this really cool, you know, manifestation is a weird thing, the concept of manifestation, but there's this woman called Lacey Phillips. She developed a method called To Be Magnetic. She has a podcast that I listen very often, and she has a neuroscientist in the group. So it's neuroscience based. And the idea is to rewire your brain. And she has this really cool concept called expanders, and it's exactly what you said. I have low self-esteem. I have problems with that. We all do. But the reason it works for me is because what she does is when you question yourself, you look for someone in the real world or movies or anywhere that did exactly what you think you could not do. Like, for example, I've been telling myself I cannot do crow pose at yoga. So what I do is I look for someone my age.
Okay, that is a very challenging pose, just to be clear.
Yeah, but it's not because I don't have the strength. I put this in my head.
Yeah.
So what I've been doing with that concept from Lacey is I look for someone that it's my height, my body type, my age, who can do crow pose. And I just see, it's called see to believe, believe. And you just see that person doing crow pose, and you say, why do you think you cannot do it that person can? And you can do that with everything, you know. You can't, if you think you cannot get a job that, you know, you think it's out of your league, look for people who just did a career change and got a job that's similar to that, and understand why you think you cannot do. I work with that a lot. It's super helpful.
Well, I just dropped her link in the chat. And also, you know, that's kind of the whole purpose of Gals and Gear Speakers Bureau, right? Is that we were tired of going to all these tech conferences where there weren't any women on stage talking about all the things that we know, lots of women who know how to talk about. And, you know, that whole see it to be it. And so it just, you know, that's part of our purpose writ large, right, is to make sure women see themselves in all the different roles, whether it's, you know, cinematographer or engineer or software designer or animator or company vice president, you know, because you do need to be able to kind of manifest that and see it to help yourself. One cool thing that Erica has in her book, which I've started doing, and it's actually pretty empowering and extremely low tech, is she has a suggestion to do wins of the week or wins of the day or wins of the month. So I just cut up some paper into little strips, and at the end of the day, even if I've had the most stressful, horrifying day, I just write something that actually happened that was good. And I put a little bowl on I'm like in mirror image here, back behind my little IABM award. There's a bowl back there that I've started putting these little strips in. And I'll tell you, it is like life-changing to have this little bowl, because if you've had a like craptastic day, you just go to your bowl and you're like, you know what? I actually had some serious wins this month. You know, because we're just always we're always on to the next thing. We're always doubting ourselves, or we're
Mhm.
always like, whatever, that didn't work for that client, or this, I have this problem on this shoot, or whatever the thing is that we're working on. Because we're problem solvers, right? By nature. So we constantly are seeing lists of problems instead of all the solutions we came up with. So I would highly recommend putting a little jar on your desk and having your wins of the week, and just physically writing it down, not typing it, I think is like a whole process unto itself. That's very good too.
Mhm.
Yeah, I have a notebook where I write compliments. So, I write, it stays in my bedside, and I'm like, what are the things that people told me today that actually, made me feel either important or, beautiful, or whatever I wanted to feel today. And I just write down at the end of the month with like my little moon ritual, I go back and I read it.
Good for you.
I love these ideas.
It's great, right? Danilda, did you have a
Yeah,
question?
I wanted to chime in with something that helps me, especially like in between or those nebulous times during my career and day. Hi, I'm Danilda, everyone. Jen, it's
Hi.
nice to hear from you. Hi, Carla. I like to do not necessarily as cliche as it sounds, random acts of kindness, but I think when you're in that state, it's really helpful to get the attention off of yourself and kind of
Mhm.
put energy into being there for someone else. Whether it's volunteering or just, helping your neighbor with carrying a bag to the car if it's an elderly person, something as simple as that. It's low tech too, but taking that energy off of yourself and accomplishing something nice for someone else is really, I think therapeutic
Right.
would be the word I would use.
That's
So
a great
look for
idea, Danilda.
generosity.
And I think it also kind of refocuses, that a lot of
You
what
are,
we complain about are first world problems, like,
yeah.
I mean, really, if you're working at a soup kitchen, or you're helping somebody who needs to learn how to read, or whatever the issues are, it just kind of reminds you that some of the problems we think are so insurmountable are probably not that important in the
Yeah.
scheme of life.
Mhm.
And sometimes it doesn't have to be that structured, because I know time is of the essence. And as you said, Amy, we have splintered time, but I think that you can also just look at it as a way of, and like I said, practicing generosity. And it might speak to that sense of doubt that people have when they're in between roles. Like, I can't accomplish something even as simple as putting a smile on someone's face because, I don't know, I helped them drive somewhere or gave them a ride, just the
Mhm.
simple things like that. So look for those opportunities and, feel good about it. You do good, feel
And
good.
usually you get so much back from that.
Yeah.
It
Mhm.
makes you feel good as well, I think. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's great.
Well, thank you.
We don't have any other questions. I'm going to wrap this up so people can just chit chat afterwards. So I wanted to wrap it up by saying, first, thank you to our amazing panel. It's so wonderful to have Jin Soon and Carla with us and part of our Gals and Gear community. I want to remind you to pop into the screening room and check out Alicia Cunningham's new film promo. And if you want to support that, you can do that. Buy Erica Ginsberg's new book on creative resilience. Also, if you know young early career women of color, we are now partnering with the Emma Bowen Foundation. They have some really wonderful programs, including a new cohort coming up for women in the media and entertainment industry who are of color and are sort of early in their careers. So I just dropped that into the chat, and we'd love to send some folks their way. And of course, if you are thinking about coming out to NAB show, or you're already scheduled to come out, we'd love to have you sign up for our leadership summit. It's just an incredible experience. You can't really explain it unless you've been in the room with 100 other women across the industry, every type of job, every type of person, every type of background, all coming together to develop their leadership skills and meet each other and support each other. And we have an amazing lineup of speakers, including our keynote speaker, Samira Bakhtiar, who's the general manager of AWS. She just signed on, and she's fantastic and has a really great story to tell. We've got folks from Adobe, we've got folks from Fox Sports, we've got people from very different lenses across the industry. I will also be doing a deep dive workshop on how to build your professional brand, because I think there's some things women need to do to maintain their brand as they develop their careers. So it's going to be a fantastic half-day program. and we'd love for you to join us. So thanks again for joining us at Gals and Gear Tequity Tuesday. We have a March session coming up on March 19th, a look ahead at NAB show with a focus on sustainability, which will include a conversation with Barbara Lang from Kaibo 121, which is a global greenie initiative in our industry. So you don't want to miss that one, March 19th. And so thank you again for joining us, and I'll see you next time on Tequity Tuesday.
Yay.